Hello, online world. This is Off the Record with Migs Bustos, and I have a very special guest for today. I am with NBA insider Brandon Scoopy Robinson, all the way from the East Coast in New Jersey. Brandon, I hope you're doing good.
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, Miguel Biggs, thanks for having me, man. Really just trying to follow the rules and just stay focused, and we're trying to get through this, man.
Mhm.
People from different areas and have lived and said different things. So really, we're just trying to get through it, and hopefully there'll be some more basketball to watch and to play pretty soon.
Mhm. Now, I we were chatting a few days back in setting up this call, and it has taken a big hit. The sports world has taken a big hit, especially the NBA. Can you tell us more about the situation? What was going on inside the NBA? When this was getting hot, even before Rudy Gobert got tested positive, what was the atmosphere like on how the league was dealing with this situation?
Well, I mean, when people talk about social distancing, really and truly, what I find is that the NBA was kind of already on it. As far as 6 to 8 feet, they had closed the locker. Pretty much they were doing media pressers in a designated area with a podium there and then microphones. So, the NBA had already kind of started kind of figuring out, next steps. So, credit to them for that. But, for people who are on the beat every day, that's your livelihood communicating with players, whether they're one-on-one interviews, whether they're group interviews, etc. So, it's definitely a new normal in how things are being covered. But then, once Rudy Gobert tested positive, that changed the whole landscape. They shut it down, and it's crazy because prior to that happening, I had actually spoken to Charles Barkley that week, and one of the things he had said was um, he didn't understand how you could keep fans away from an arena. And I think when you that statement spoke volumes because you depend on fans for not just revenue but for excitement and to cheer on the home team, but also I think there was kind of like a preconceived notion that media and fans were going to give players an illness, and in fact, a lot of players tested positive. So I think we're still figuring out a lot of things, and we've learned a little bit more, but we're still figuring a lot of stuff out. So that's kind of before the NBA went on hiatus where we were.
Well, obviously, that not just the NBA, major leagues around the world have suspended their games even before this lockdown all over the world's happening. But did you think? Well, actually, NBA was one of the last major sports leagues to actually cancel games or postpone games. Or as of the moment, did you feel that that was a good decision for them to shut it down a little bit later compared to the other leagues compared to around the world?
Well, I thought that the NBA was still gathering things, but I think what was interesting was once the NBA did shut everything down, I mean, things followed suit. Like schools shut down, churches shut down. When the NBA, who gets a lot of attention from all walks of life, does things, it's as if it's almost like a presidential move, so to speak. So to directly answer your question, I think the NBA was being cautious, and I think they were also looking at the investments that they had with those teams. It's projected that if the NBA does not resume play, they could lose somewhere in the billions. That's from revenue, that's from ticket sales, that's from merchandise and more, and the playoffs. Like I think that the NBA was just being cautious and seeing what was next. And I think that once the Rudy Gobert situation happened in that game against the Oklahoma City Thunder, that's where things changed. I was speaking to some people that were actually part of the Oklahoma City Thunder staff who were quarantined after they made all the fans leave and they quarantined both teams for a while, and they didn't really want to talk about it too much. But from the little bit that I gathered, they were just wondering like what was next steps because I remember there was a night game, a game later that night after was the Sacramento Kings and the New Orleans Pelicans playing, which they eventually canceled that game. It just was a lot of questions of what was next. And the NBA even considered doing games without fans. And imagine if the Brooklyn Nets and the Golden State Warriors had played that game. Kevin Durant was with the Nets at that time. He tested positive. You wonder different ramifications. There were other guys on that Brooklyn Nets team that tested positive. So there are some things that we're still figuring out, and there's some things that people can be thankful for that they did not meet with certain people and contract certain things. But we're still figuring out how you actually contract this virus. I'm no doctor, but there's a lot of questions that people are still trying to get answered.
Is the number growing in terms of the population in the NBA, in terms of contracting the virus? Would you know of any information that besides from what was declared, of course, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, two Laker players, Christian Wood from the Detroit Pistons, besides them, would you know?
Well, just for those who are listening or watching, have been 14 cases, whether that is players or that is staff. So you have staff members on the Philadelphia 76ers who contracted it. You had four members of the LA Lakers. You had a couple members on the Brooklyn Nets. Kevin Durant came out. Christian Wood of the Detroit Pistons, and of course Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell. I've spoken to some players who are concerned about you know whether they can contract it because you really just don't know how you get it. Like you think about it, right? I had this conversation with someone recently. When you think of Michael Jordan's flu game, he picked up a basketball. For those who are paying attention, Michael Jordan played in the NBA Finals while having the flu and scored a lot of points. And you know, he was touching a basketball that everybody else was touching. Right?
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
don't think about that. That's the part that gets lost in translation. How many people could have contracted a flu symptom from touching, say, basketball Michael Jordan was scoring on? We don't think about that. I think a lot of people are now starting to think about those things. So I think when you present day in 2020, when you're looking at coronavirus, look at all of the people who Rudy Gobert, for example, came in contact with during the Utah Jazz's run. Like they were on a road trip for 10 days, if I'm not mistaken. They had played the Cleveland Cavaliers, the New York Knicks, the Boston Celtics, the Toronto Raptors, the Detroit Pistons. And a member of the Detroit Pistons contracted it. So you ask the question, did he can contract it from Rudy Gobert? You don't know. Okay, so then you look at the situation with the Lakers, right? Four members of the Lakers who contracted it, and you look at the Nets. When you look at that game that the Nets and the Lakers played, when Anthony Davis was trying to hit that game-winning shot against the Nets a couple of weeks ago, who was yelling in his ear from the bench? Kevin Durant.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that Anthony Davis has it at all, but what I am saying is this. What I'm saying is we don't know if it's coming from breathing, if it's touching a basketball, if it's shaking hands. Like it's just a lot of things that we just don't know right now, and there is apprehension within players that I have spoken to whether how they can contract it. It reminds me a lot, and that's not the same. Magic Johnson tested HIV positive. I actually had Gary Vitti, who was a Lakers trainer for years, who actually treated. He was on my podcast, Scoop Radio. He talked about how he treated Magic Johnson without gloves on, and he got a lot of angry viewers
Hmm.
and fans and letters from medical people to spread a message of like, this back then many people perceived that being HIV positive or having AIDS was the gay man's disease, which was debunked at that point. There were still people gathering information at that point. Is the point I'm making, and I think that it's in that same vein. How do you contract coronavirus? We're still figuring that out. Is it from droplets? Is it from shaking hands? Do you get it from touching somebody, slapping them on the butt after a good play? Like you're still figuring all of those things out, and I think that's just where the league is right now.
What is life like for you guys covering the NBA?
I actually, for me personally, have gotten more work done since I've been home. I will say that being connected, picking up a phone, calling people, texting people, and being in my field for a long time, I'm blessed. I know I'm not on the go traveling a lot throughout the course of the season anyway. I've been texting and on the phone with executives, current players, hired players. I just had Shaquille O'Neal on the Scoopy Radio podcast last week. So, I mean, it's just staying in touch. To be honest with you, it's easier to get people to sit down. Shaq and I have been trying to nail down a time to get on the podcast for a while, and we were texting, and he was like, "Let's do it." So, we finally got a chance to sit down and talk, and we
Supposed to be NBA playoffs time, but moving forward, given that this whole uncertainty is in place, what do you think is next now for the NBA? How should they play this out?
Well, I have spoken to some folks within the league office who have shared with me. They intimated that um, some decision could come soon as far as an update as to what the next moves are. That doesn't mean that it's a finite decision. I think it all depends on what happens with the coronavirus. Me personally, here in the States, President Trump has said that, an extended amount of time of quarantining through April 30th is now in effect. I, I, I wonder if the NBA will create a playoff situation as is. Meaning, if you're in the Western Conference, the Memphis Grizzlies are the eighth seed. They're going to the playoffs, and they play the Lakers in the first round. I will tell you that from a perspective of even money, a lot of things have been messed up. I'll tell you that Scottie Pippen, for example, as well as Penny Hardaway, were rolling out plans for the promotion of retroing their sneakers. There were supposed to be little penny commercials this summer
Mm-hmm.
during the playoffs. There was Tracy McGrady was supposed to be rolling out his sneaker line. The Nike was supposed to be rolling out Kobe Bryant related stuff, retroing sneakers, kind of the way they were doing with Michael Jordan during the playoffs. That rollout was supposed to begin. There were a lot of things that were affected by coronavirus, and so I think that the NBA, if they're smart, they waited out a little longer to see what's going on. The thing that's conflicting though is okay. There's talks that the season could resume and or the playoffs in July. Arenas have schedules. There's concerts. Ice Cube's Big Three has their Big Three
Mm-hmm.
tournament going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot of a conundrum of just different conflicting things. So I think the NBA is going to have to make a prudent decision. There's been rumors about potentially playing in the Bahamas. You hear a lot of things.
Neutral
You talk to
ground.
a lot of people. Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. So
Mm-hmm.
it's I think it's just a wait and see. And I also think a lot of players just got to get well because here's the thing: there's been talk that heat will make the coronavirus subside and that it lives in cold air. Okay, in the East Coast, for example, it gets hot in June or July. Maybe the coronavirus dies, but what happens in the fall when it gets cold again?
That's
Is it going
true.
to reemerge? So those are
Mm-hmm.
things I think a lot of people are considering within the league.
Just a
Next
follow
steps.
up. Scoop, just a follow up. Is there talks that it may be canceled? The season may be canceled given maybe a due date or a deadline that they can't decide or there's no decision yet.
I think there's still the decision, but it's been talked about. I think ultimately it depends on what happens. There's been discussion about just playing games at practice centers without fans. They've bounced a lot of different ideas out, and it doesn't look good right now. And I think there's a lot more out there as far as public health. But I think really and truly we're just in an information gathering stage. You just have to be careful with the information that you put out there that you then force people to believe. What I have heard though is, it could go either way. They could start in July, they could cancel the season, and I'll tell you, just as a person who's an observer of basketball, kind of sucks, for the Lakers because their competition in the Western Conference doesn't get any better next season. The Warriors come back healthy. Uh, there's a situation where even Anthony Davis may not resign. He can exercise his free agency options. You look at Giannis Antetokounmpo; he could join a team in the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference via free agency. So there's a lot of just things that are taking place.
All right, so there you have it. As always, Brandon, Scooby Robinson, thank you so much for your time. Stay safe and healthy. And as always, this is Off the Record with Migs Bustos, and see you in the next episode.